We are ready to go.
Great. Well, good evening, everyone. I now call the December 14th, 2021 meeting of the Lafayette General Plan Advisory Committee in order. The meeting is streaming live on the city's YouTube channel and also is accessible by Zoom webinar. And the link to the login is on the city's calendar. With that, I'd like to ask staff to call the roll to confirm members of the Gpac in attendance.
Great. Errol Singer. Absent. Martha Castellanti. Absent. John Jenkins.
John, you're on mute.
He raised his hand.
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Stella Witherspoon. You are also muted. But I see.
Sorry, my space bar is not working. I'm present.
Thank you. Matt Pease.
Present.
Beth Needle.
Here.
Thank you. Jim Cervantes.
Present.
Thank you. Mike Kim. Absent. Susie Kelly.
Here.
Thank you. Christine Rasmussen.
Present.
Chris Lee.
Present.
And Anna Radnich is absent. And Mayor Geringer.
Present.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. And maybe before we actually get rolling here, I certainly would love to welcome our new Mayor Geringer to the Gpac. You've been with us in watching over the past year, are very familiar with this committee, and we certainly welcome you to a more active role and look forward to your insight and suggestions as we go through this process. So welcome aboard officially. We're very happy to have you.
Thank you.
And with that, I'd like to ask a committee member to make a motion to adopt the agenda, please.
So moved.
Moved by Matt Pease. Is there a second?
Second.
Don Jenkins, second. Agenda is adopted, so we're going to move on to public comment. This would be for comment on anything not on the agenda. Those items on the agenda, individuals will have a chance to comment on as we get to those topics, but this is sort of just for general commentary. So Sarah and Renata, I'll open it to you to see if there's anyone who's raised their hand.
So if you would like to make a public comment, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen or *9 if you're calling in, and you'll be promoted as a panelist. I don't see any hands raised at this time.
Okay. Moving on to our first item, and this is a first for Gpac at least. We have a consent calendar item, which you'll note is in the package. You all received a clean and redline version of the narrative summary that we've discussed over the past couple of meetings, which is the overlay on top of that thicker data document that we've looked at before. The request was that individuals provide their comments by December 7th on this. Several of us have, and you can see what those changes are. So I guess I would say, since this is a consent item, unless anyone wants to discuss it.
I do.
Okay, so we will pull off the consent.
Sorry.
You torpedoed us, Christina. Please go ahead. No worries.
So am I allowed to start, or do I have to wait until we talk now?
I think we talk now.
Okay, it's just a couple little things. First of all, I noticed there's some errors, just like grammatical things. So how do we let you guys know about that? Like missing periods, and then there's sometimes it's a couple times there's like words written twice. So it probably when you were editing, somehow it didn't erase some of it. So how do we do that for just grammatical stuff?
I guess my suggestion, and I'll see what staff says, anything that's not substantive, that's more like in that category of fixing things, I would just get those to staff. The next
In an email. Okay.
In an email. The next stop for this document is the Planning Commission. They'll certainly go through it very carefully. But if you catch stuff like that, I would say encourage even to get it to staff.
Okay, very good. So my other thoughts that I had on here that I think we need to talk about just really quickly are some of the numbers. So let's see, it's the end of 2021 now, going into 2022, and we should be starting to get some information, I'm hoping, before this actually gets published and sent to the powers that be, that would update some of these graphs. So for example, if we look on page 2 of 11, there's the net housing increase 1980 to 2020. I would like to make a note somewhere that prior to this being actually published and sent off to whoever this is going to, the final, I guess, is going to the RENA people or HUD, that these numbers get updated, because if I'm not mistaken, we've approved a lot of new housing units that would make 2021, see how it ends at 2020. So we have 2021 already done, right? So there should be a big rise in units for the net housing increase if we can update that. Does that make sense?
I think it
For the
does.
graph?
Sarah or Diana, this goes to HCD later in 2022, I think. You'd think would have the data for 2021. How's
Correct. We can always, we have notes to keep updating things as we get information. So.
Okay, so the plan is for this whole document to be updated whenever new information comes in.
Correct.
So we don't, so there's no need to mark this, like, especially, okay.
Mm-mm. No,
All right.
we don't need to.
Okay, and that will also occur, and I know I've talked about this before, but some of the other stuff, these are based on 2019, and that was sort of, they were not the actual numbers that were coming in from all of the, from the census data and all that. So you guys will be updating those things too as well?
If we get more data, yes. Right now, there is no anticipated date when we would get updated tables for the 2020 census. We check in on the census website pretty frequently, and they're saying some things will be released in 2022 or later.
Okay, so we need to be watching that to make sure that these things get put in there. Or are you guys actively doing that?
Yeah, we're already doing that.
Okay. So those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd like to note that Namratha Kasalati's joined us. I see Stella, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I have a follow-up to what Christine asked about, and thank Christine for raising that issue about 2020 housing development. So I'm just wondering, if this report is not going to be due to HCD for a number of months, what point will the public and Gpac be able to see, I guess, the final version as it's about to get sent off? Will there be a recycle?
Oh, yes, absolutely. You're going to see the whole document and all parts of it, including this, again. And I don't have the calendar right in front of me, although I think that you have Sarah or Renata, I think you sent with the packet information about the deadlines or the timeline for things. I don't have it in front of me, otherwise I'd reference it. I don't know, Sarah or Renata.
This group will see it again, and then also it'll go through both the Planning Commission and the City Council. So the final draft will be at the City Council level, which is a public hearing, but we will also advise Gpac when that goes.
And you're referring to the housing element in totality?
In totality. Mm-hmm.
Which will include this background narrative. Okay, great. Thank
Yes.
you. Perfect. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments on the narrative summary? Hearing none. So do I need to open this up to for public comment?
Yes, you do.
I'm sorry?
Yes, you do.
Okay, well, if there's any member of the public that would like to comment on the narrative summary to the data document for the housing element, please raise your hand and indicate to staff.
I don't see any hands raised.
Okay, well then I would like to entertain a motion to approve the narrative summary to forward that to the Planning Commission for their review. I believe those are the key elements of the motion. If I have that right, Sarah.
So moved.
Matt P's motion, do I have a second? Don Jenkins, second, thank you. So Sarah or Renata, if you could please call the roll for the motion, that would be great.
Carol Singer is absent. Namratha Kasalati.
Yes.
Don Jenkins,
Yes.
Stella Wotherspoon, Matt Pease,
Yes.
Beth Needle,
Yes.
Jim Cervantes,
Yes.
Mike Kim is absent. Susie Kelly,
Yes.
Christine Rasmussen,
Yes.
Chris Lee.
Yes.
That's everybody. Thank you.
Great. So I'll make a note that this is the first in a long sequence of things that we will be forwarding off to the Planning Commission. And so one little box checked, many little boxes to be checked. But at least we got something through. So that's a moment to feel good about. Okay, with that, I'd like to turn to Commissioner activity reports. We have one item on the agenda, which is just an update from the Outreach Subcommittee that was formed at the last session. Does anyone from that group like to make an update for us?
I'm going to update for the group for this Gpac meeting. Just for your benefit, I'll repeat the members of the subcommittee. We have Carol Singer, Christine Rasmussen, Beth Needle, and myself, and Sarah is our staff liaison. And we've met, we've had 2 meetings, and then we had kind of a prep meeting for tonight's report earlier today. The job of the outreach subcommittee is try to identify the outreach process for Gpac and figure out what level of outreach we should do and how we should do it. So we started off in our first meeting with the idea that we had to identify our constituents based on the role that we had in Gpac. And that actually changed recently, thanks to Carol Singer, who did a little bit of research and was also on the Gpac committee 20 years ago. So there were no neighborhood representatives. It was not structured the way that it is now. And Carol provided some background and history to us. And that caused us to pull out, once again, the roles document that governs Gpac. And we found that, yes, we're really supposed to, at least for the neighborhoods and the at-large group, which is the one that we're having the most trouble with outreach definition, that we're not mainly responsible for continually reaching out to our constituents, but we're representing neighborhoods, we're representing their interests by virtue of living in the particular part of town that's being represented. So we kind of took a step backward and realized that maybe our job is different than what we thought about, or we thought it was, and that any program for outreach would actually be managed by staff, of course, working with us at the direction of City Council. So that has actually changed a little bit for us. It makes it a little easier to see ourselves as a more cohesive committee that is actually taking in information. And the next part now is the outreach. So we asked staff for the old stakeholder list that was sent to us, I believe, April of 2021. And we also got a copy of a Google Docs stakeholder list that had been circulated to us, again, right around that same time frame. And we're in the process of comparing the stakeholders on the 2 lists and coming up with a combined list. And then we thought we would take a look at trying to assign level of outreach. So is this particular stakeholder someone that we want to communicate with a lot? Is this a medium level of communication? Or is this the kind of stakeholder that we can notify, here, this is what we're doing. We're the Gpac, we meet this, these days. Please check in with us, and put the burden more on that level of stakeholder. So those are just ideas for right now. We're still trying to work through it. We don't expect this subcommittee to last for a very long time. It probably won't be a standing subcommittee once we, get our ship righted, so to speak, and understand the role of city council and staff. Then we'll be able to, we think, quickly come up with a plan for outreach. And one of the things we'd really like to use is Engagement HQ. Since we have it, we really want to be able to use it.
Mhm.
So that's where we're at.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chris. And any questions for Chris or members of the subcommittee?
And if
Chris,
any members of the subcommittee have further comments, please.
So I saw Matt was had a question, and then Stella, you have your hand up. So absent any other member of the subcommittee, I'm going to pass it to Matt and then to Stella.
Yeah, Chris, I got a little confused in the early part. The members who represent neighborhoods, do they represent just that neighborhood, or is there a broader representation? I got a little bit lost in that first part.
Well, for instance, Christine represents Burton Valley.
Right.
Burton Valley is really big. Mike Kim represents Ocolonus Valley and Happy Valley. That's also a big area. Jim's got the Release Valley area, and I'm the at-large, so I go pretty much where needed. So one of the things we're trying to figure out is, I'm sure you remember the maps that we had for our Housing Element 101 series. Those were a little mixed up because downtown ended up in Burton Valley. So we need to sort of reassess and rejigger responsibilities. But for the most part, over this past year, the neighborhood reps have been, aligned with their physical neighborhoods. Or when I say neighborhoods, I guess I mean areas of representation.
Okay, and you think that will continue going forward?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Stella, did you take your hand down?
I did. I'm sorry. I was having some technical difficulties on my computer and hearing of audio feed, but it turns out it was the last Gpac meeting on YouTube that somehow started speaking to me. So sorry. I'm all good now. I can hear everyone.
Okay, great. So I've got Carol and then Dawn.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in here. The neighborhood reps were picked on the areas of the city that were used for the city manager. So I think they have certain outlines. They were not decided by us. They were the outlines used for the city managers. What was it? Teresa, the city managers, selection or? So they're defined lines.
The citizens interview committee.
Yeah.
Okay. We will check with them.
Okay. Carol, anything else, or I'll pass it to Dawn?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Dawn, please.
Well, my question is, how does this differ? We had in this packet just a ton of correspondence that came in the initial packet, and then today and yesterday, a half a dozen or maybe 25 or 30 letters. Many of them were obviously duplicated, but from a particular region. Do those things go to the thing that you're talking about, Chris, or?
Yeah, well,
what is the connection, what you're doing and what we're being asked to read from all these people?
Right. So I don't know the full story of what started that public comment campaign, but it was from one neighborhood. And I guess the first thing we're concerned with is our outreach to residents of Lafayette. And hopefully there'll be a loop. But what we want to make sure of is that we've built an outreach process that keeps us in the loop with our constituents. We don't want to, a year from now say, gee, we don't feel like we got enough feedback.
Right.
Well, but that part of that loop is to, in effect, invite your constituents to write and do as these people did in the Deer Hill area.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Don. Any other questions from the group or comments from the members of the subcommittee? Okay. Chris, thank you very much. Thank you all for your effort to try to move us ahead on and clarify the outreach part of what we do. It's going to be very important as we get into what's coming up ahead. Are there any other commissioner activity items that people wanted to report on? Okay, seeing none, then we will move on to our first discussion topic, which is the mission statement update. I'll make a note that this is the anniversary, December 14th of 2020, when the City Council asked us to take a look at the mission statement in response to a query from Gpac from an earlier meeting we had back in November of last year. So we are at the 1 year mark on our journey here. And I think we're getting close to the end of that part, at least with respect to Gpac. So with that, Matt, let me turn it to you to talk through the group on the latest and greatest with respect to the mission statement, and we'll take it from there.
Okay, well, thanks, Jim. In the packet that was sent out, there was a cover letter where we summarized kind of what's going on over the last year, and then our latest draft that we are submitting tonight. Last month, we had a dedicated meeting to discuss the last month's draft, and we got a lot of input both from Gpac members as well as members of the public. And after that meeting, the subcommittee met several times to think about the feedback that we've received and make some adjustments. And you see the reflection of that in the current draft. And the most significant changes from that public meeting is first, we highlighted kind of this range of differences in the different types of neighborhoods in the second to the last bullet point under characteristics. We believe that this better reflects the diversity of the different neighborhoods. Over time, Lafayette has become more complex. The neighborhoods have changed, and arguably some of the neighborhoods are still rural or semi-rural, as we say here, but you look at neighborhoods downtown and they're not rural anymore. They're, closer to urban than they are downtown or the neighborhoods. So we believe that this better reflects that the city is more diverse, it is more complex, and that different solutions are going to work differently in different neighborhoods. Secondly, we've added some language to continue to highlight the importance of the natural attributes of the town, whether it's the ridge lines, the parks, the creeks, things such as that. Clearly that came through loud and clear in all of our public outreach. And we've also we talk about the specific involvement of volunteers in committees and commissions in helping run the city. And then finally, based on some discussions we had with the Transportation Committee, we added characteristics about the importance of safe travel for all modes of transportation, whether it's driving, biking, and pedestrian. And certainly the tragedy that occurred about a month ago with the crossing guard certainly highlights the importance of that. And there's a lot of efforts to try to improve that over time. So where we are now is I went back and counted. We've had 22 formal meetings of the Vision and Mission Statement Subcommittee. And we believe we've come up with a very strong draft that can be considered by the Gpac. And if you approve it tonight, it will be moved to the City Council for them to consider. We've given 3 updates to the City Council over the last year. We've given a number of updates to the Gpac, and we've done our best to collaborate with all of the parties that are considering this draft. We've met with groups on Zoom or individually. I think I counted 5 for myself. I'm sure Jim and Naratha have their own set. In the last year, we started by adopting some of the best practices from other similar city-sized cities and gotten input from a lot of different individuals and groups within Lafayette. We conducted 3 surveys. In total, we had over 1,000, just under 1,000 responses. And in the end, we tried to prioritize the important attributes in the town and that make it special. At the same time, not just emphasizing the values that we've had for a long time, but also trying to provide guidance for the future, that this future is inevitably going to bring changes that will both be beneficial to the city, this town, as well as challenges. So we've tried to balance those 2 together. In the end, the subcommittee understands, we're not going to satisfy everybody. We do believe, however, that this draft is a lot more inclusive and is more detailed than some of the previous statements over the last 50 years. And we think it's going to help us address an environment in the Bay Area that's going to become increasingly complicated, whether you look at it from an economic, a legislative, or an environmental standpoint. So finally, in terms of wrapping up my remarks, I just want to thank the rest of the Gpac for kind of their patience as well as their participation as we've gone through this process. I want to thank the broader community for their input. We've had a number of good discussions with a variety of people throughout the area. And then I also, in particular, want to thank my 2 fellow members of my subcommittee who have had a lot of patience and gone through a lot to get to where we are today. So that's the end of my prepared remarks. I'll turn it over to see if Jim or Namratha would like to add anything to those comments before we open it up to the Gpac.
Namratha, would you like to add anything?
I don't have anything.
Okay. I think Matt did a really good summary. One of the changes that we have is that there's a change in the language in the first sentence, which we really kind of got from outreach to the community of students at Akalani's, where now we say our vision is to be a welcoming, family-friendly city for all ages and backgrounds. That and backgrounds piece was something that was kind of suggested by a student. Don't know who that person is, but I thought, okay, that kind of captures it. I mean, that to me was like a missing piece, and I thought it was a good contribution. And honestly, it was one of many, many contributions we've received along the way. And you can see this if you look at the language now versus, say, the draft in July. Our first one was a draft in October, one in November. And I can't tell you how many interim drafts that folks never saw have been worked on this. But all of that came about through input from many, many different sources, some of which were left on the cutting room floor, I guess I might have to say, because we tried to sort of keep this tight as best we could. So maybe with that, I'll see, are there any, so we'll have questions from the members of the Gpac. I'll open it up for any sort of public comments, bring it back to Gpac for discussion and then a vote. So are there any questions from members of the Gpac on the mission statement draft in front of you?
I have one quick question.
Shoot.
So the guiding characteristics of our community, they're listed there. Is there any particular reason why they're in this order, or they were just kind of thrown out there, how they're thought of? And I was just curious.
They're pretty random for the most part, Christine. Yeah. I think the one about value everyone, that's always been at the top of the list and through all the drafts. We feel important, we feel that's important. It's part of the outreach diversity, but quite honestly, I don't think we really thought through that there's any rank order here or any importance to the order.
Okay,
It-
thank you.
And just to pick up on that a little bit, yeah, there's not an implied priority list here on that, but you could say in a way it kind of starts big to small. I mean, value everybody is a big, big statement and an important one. We talk about environmental sustainability and travel. We've got the setting, our parklands, hills, and so on. Get to the downtown, the neighborhoods, and then we talk about the sort of the way we do things as a government. So you could say it is sort of from the big narrowing down, the way it worked out. It's just the way it evolved. I'd love to say that we thought about that at the very outset, but it kind of like, that's just kind of how it evolved, I think.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that, you know, the last two or one isn't at risk of being chopped off, so.
Yeah.
Now, we're not sending any particular messages here in terms of order.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Carol, you've got your hand up.
Well, I'll just make this. In the vision and mission statement, the next to last sentence where it says, we achieve this, doing these things, to work together with our city government to make Lafayette a highly desirable. Couldn't it be to keep Lafayette? Isn't that what we are?
We chose that word because we think we can always get better, Carol.
Okay, all right. Sounds like it hasn't been that.
No, it's a sense of continuous improvement and, you know, striving to always get better in what is a changing environment and will probably continue to change over the next 20 years.
Okay.
Where's my?
And if I could chime in, I think that's kind of a good framing. One of my business school professors wrote a book, Good to Great, the way you look at companies. How do you take a good company, make it great? I kind of think this is a great community, but to Matt's point, you can always, I think, make it a better place. That's what the aspiration is. So that's the hope or the goal. And that's what I think what we're trying to get to in that.
Okay.
I think I've got Susie and then Dawn.
Yes, hi. So I had a question. This is actually was brought to my attention from somebody in our neighborhood, and I agree with it. The second to last, where it says support our distinct residential areas, which range from semi-rural, single family to downtown mixed use, multifamily neighborhoods. Downtown also has single family, and we want to make sure we're represented too, because we're not necessarily semi-rural. And I think that's a bit of the question that keeps on going on. Well, downtown, pile all the housing there. But a lot of us want to stay as single family neighborhoods. And so I think it's important to note that.
Susie, it's a great point. We wrestled with this sentence. I will have to.
I know it's
agree.
a difficult wording kind of a thing.
Yeah, the word we finally settled is it's a range.
Right.
And it's not to denote that there are only two, you know, semi-rural single family, and the other one is mixed use multifamily. It's a range, and there are things that fall in between. So I know where you live, you're right. Those are all single family houses. I think they're somewhat different than the houses that are out in Burton Valley or Release Valley. But we're trying to depict this range, and that there are data points along that range, that each of those neighborhoods are somewhat unique, and they're hard to describe with a single word. We try to use that range. And so it's not meant to exclude anybody or not recognize that there's different subcategories. The one neighborhood I'm in, I don't call it semi-rural, I call it suburban. It's on the trail.
Right.
So it's a range.
Range.
Okay.
Okay.
Dawn?
You know, my question is simply that I know we have batted this around, and I know an awful lot of the correspondence has been in regards to the semi-rural question. And so am I correct that by, in effect, agreeing with this, we're tossing the ball to city council, and they will hear all of this over the whatever council meeting this is discussed, and they will ultimately make the decision what happens with that word?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's exactly right.
And not just the word, the whole.
Well, the whole
document,
thing,
but
yeah.
yeah,
But that seems to be the cross that everybody wants to die on.
There you have
I don't like to have that phrase put quite that way, but I get it.
And there are different ways to frame that. We've had some proposed to us, very thoughtful comments. In the end, this is kind of where we ended up with. There were other suggestions, like I said, left on the cutting room floor.
Well, I think you all have done an outstanding job. Trying to thread a needle like this is a near impossibility. I'm glad we have such wise city council members.
I am too. Any other questions rather, from the Gpac? So hearing none, I'd like to open this to public comment, please. So Sarah and Renata, can you see if there's anyone listening in who would like to make a comment?
Yes, if you would like to make a public comment, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen, or *9 if you're calling in. And we have several hands raised. Go ahead and keep your hands raised. Don Eames has been invited to join the meeting.
Great. And Don, welcome.
Hello.
Welcome. Welcome.
Wondering what consideration was given to adding property owners that have a vested interest in our stakeholders in the city, but are not mentioned at all in the vision and mission statement.
I think you might have had a written comment to that effect too, Don, if memory serves.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you had a written comment to that effect as well.
Yes.
I don't know, Matt, do you want to?
Well,
Actually, Chair, would it be maybe more appropriate if we listened to all the public comments and then you just took notes and responded to at the end? Is that okay?
Sure. Okay. Don, do you, I've noted that down here. Any other comments or questions that you have?
Oh, no, just what was included in some of my emails that I sent earlier today, but you'll probably get a chance to read it after this meeting.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. And we'll circle back and pick that up when and have their general discussion then. Thank you. Sarah, anyone else?
Grace Dixon is now in the meeting, followed by Libby Henry.
Okay. Yeah, Grace, welcome.
Hello?
Yes, welcome.
Oh, thank you. Great. Okay, so I just thank you for all of your hard work, and this has really come a long way. Just a few suggestions. One that I don't know, perhaps if Don Eames likes this suggestion, what if it was a safe community and then cross out for residents and visitors alike? Just a safe community. That covers everybody. Residents, visitors, property owners, employees, it covers everybody. And then the very last words, where people can live, work, play, and visit. Because I think that really will entice then, tourism money. If people think, yes, this is someplace where I can play, not just live and work and visit. Then finally, the fourth bullet point under guiding characteristics of our community, I think we try to lump a lot of words behind protect and enhance. And I think there are certain things that need to be protected. And I think there are certain things that need to be enhanced. So for instance, protect hills, ridgelines, and open spaces, but enhance parklands, trails, and creeks. So to be as tight as possible, my suggestion is just to switch around a few words in that sentence to say protect hills, ridgelines, and open spaces, and enhance parklands, trails, and creeks. This comes from just a lot of history where I think perhaps if we just protected our parklands, then, for instance, play elements would never be put in our parklands because they would just be protected. They wouldn't be, entice different types of recreation and play. So I think we need to be careful about the choice of the order of those words there. And finally, if we weren't as concerned about being absolutely tight and looking into the future, I think we really need to recognize, since we want to be sustainable and we're going to have a great deal of people living downtown with a lack of green space, a lack of yards, I think that we need to say something about ensure commensurate or sufficient or adequate recreation options for all ages and abilities, proximate, to their neighborhoods. I think that's missing here. And I think it's going to be a desperate need going forward in the next 20 years. And that's all I have to say. I think I missed page 3. Did I miss the ship sail on page 3? On the housing element, background data and programs?
That was a previous, yes, that was on consent.
Okay, because the PTR had sent Carol some comments to give to the Gpac, and I was here on this thing, but on the call, but I did not recognize what you called the consent item and what it says. It says narrative. You kept calling it the narrative summary, and I guess I'm looking at page 3 and it doesn't say narrative summary. So, well, I missed that opportunity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Grace. Sarah, other comments from the public?
Libby Henry will join the meeting, followed by Sharon Farley.
Great. Libby, welcome aboard. The floor is yours.
Yeah, for some reason, it takes my computer a long time to join a meeting. Sorry about that. And thank you for taking my call. I don't know if anybody has been able, I sent a rather long email this afternoon. And I don't know if any of you have had a chance.
I saw it, Libby.
Anyway, a couple of things. First of all, regarding what Carol and Teresa said earlier about the way the different people, representatives were chosen, maybe I'm misunderstanding what they were talking about, but I thought they were talking about how they were chosen, and they were chosen by, it was a lottery that Mayor Anderson picked the names out of a hat. So I know because I put my name in the hat and I didn't get chosen. So I don't understand what they're talking about, this interview process or something. Because
so, actually, Libby, the comment here is with respect to the mission statement. That's what we're getting public comment on at this point.
Okay, but that's what they were talking about.
Right, but we're talking about
anyway,
the mission statement right now.
So in regard to that, I'm a little concerned, actually a little more than concerned that, and I know that I have written the Gpac before about this, about reaching out to the 10,000 homeowners in this town and getting feedback from them, since there's less than 1,000 people that responded to the surveys. And I know that, I'm not the only person that suggested that, but you haven't done that. And on the other hand, you seem to give a lot of weight, and this is not to put aside the kids at Akalani's or anything, but, that's versus a couple of hundred kids who are not even voters, and versus 10,000 homeowners that do the living and working and supporting the community in this town. And you're willing to reach out to them, but not to the rest of us. And that doesn't seem quite representative, to say the least. And I'm still wondering why that can't be done or hasn't been done. And I hope that you address that.
Will.
You know, because obviously the survey wasn't that successful. If you got less than 1,000 responses for 2 different surveys, but you could have sent a postcard to 10,000 households like you did for the housing element. As I suggested, and I know other people suggested other ways to reach out. And I'd also would like to understand what the definition of a stakeholder is. I would think that a stakeholder is anybody who lives in Lafayette, particularly people that pay property taxes and rent and mortgages in this town. I don't understand what is the differentiation? What is what is a stakeholder versus somebody who's not, that lives in Lafayette?
Right, we could touch on that. I think I'm getting a high sign from Sarah on the timing here.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Let me thank you very much.
Thanks.
Sarah, anyone? We have another person, I think, right?
Sharon Farley will enter the meeting, followed by Cheryl M.
Okay, great. Sharon, welcome. Sharon, I think you might be muted.
Okay, I should not be muted now.
Welcome.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to follow up with what Susie mentioned earlier, because I am in a single family neighborhood in downtown. And so it is important to me to have that be in the guiding characteristic statement where it says mixed use multifamily neighborhoods. I don't see why it can't say mixed use multifamily single family neighborhoods. Are you following?
I heard you.
Yeah. So we have just so I'm clear, we reference semi-rural single family, and we go to downtown mixed use / multifamily neighborhoods.
I'm saying mixed use / multifamily / single family neighborhoods. Yeah. You know, it might be redundant to have it be semi-rural single family, but I think it's an important distinction that there's areas in downtown, which I'm in, that have single family homes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you very much. And Sarah, I think we have someone else as well, correct?
Yes, Cheryl M. will enter the meeting, followed by Robert L.
Okay. Cheryl, welcome.
Getting through that wormhole, I tell you.
You made it. Congratulations.
I made it. So I am amazed that I'm following Sharon. I also live in a single family neighborhood right off of Mount Dale Boulevard. And I concur with what Sharon just said. Just adding single family with a slash is perfect. If we're going to be inclusive seems to be the hot word in this whole thing, inclusive, that we include single family. I'm not trying to take out any other form of housing. I'm just trying to include the single family, which is all the way through the boulevard from east to west end side. There are single family houses behind Trader Joe's. There's Bickerstaff and Crescent Circle. Almanar Court has mixed, and we're also in a single family neighborhood. And so it's really important that we have that acknowledgement And as for what Don said, I don't know if you got a letter. I also sent a letter. It might have been forwarded by Susie. I'm not sure, but it was sent to the subcommittee. Talking about the commercial property owners being a stakeholder. And Libby actually had an interesting point also in that, you know, the residents are stakeholders, and I have to go back and look. I can't look at it at the same time that I'm talking to you, but if that's not there, then it should be. But most important point right now is that the single family get added to that second to last bullet point, as Sharon mentioned. Thank you.
Great. Cheryl, thank you very much. And I think we've got Rob coming in, Sarah?
Mhm.
Great.
If there are any other public commenters, please raise your hand. And we'll give you your time slot.
Rob, welcome. Here we are. Welcome, Rob.
Hello, it's Robert Lavoie. Sorry, I don't know how to edit the box there. So I wanted to echo the comments of Elliot Hudson, and I agree with Sharon that we need to make sure that the downtown includes all the elements of the housing that exist already, because part of the diversity of the downtown area is having a mix of single family and multifamily and townhouses, so forth. And hopefully we don't lose all those and just have overdense housing that the developers are trying to build now. I'd like to say that the December 8th drafts failed to provide guidance to the look and feel and character of the physical town. And I would say, I agree with his comment here. It says much of what's wrong with the drafts could be mitigated by revising the first sentence of the vision and mission to read as follows. Lafayette is a welcoming community for people of all ages that derives distinctive charm from its semi-rural history and setting. I think a lot of people seem to be hung up on the idea of the semi-rural is not reflecting downtown or Moraga Boulevard. But what we have is character that's different from our surrounding communities. And we have the, you know, we still see the hills, we have lots of trees. And so I think that the semi-rural is what got us here and what makes us unique from our neighbors. Everybody says we don't want to be like Walnut Creek. And, you know, I think Alamo or Danville is more like the type of community, and that's the semi-rural. So I would encourage you to consider that. Under state law, the basic purpose of the general plan is to provide to guide the physical development of the community. So a lot of these other elements that keep slipping back in get away from defining the physical elements of the city. So I think I'll call it a day there. I'd really encourage you to read that whole letter from Elliot Hudson. It's very good. Thank you.
Okay. Rob, thank you very much. Sarah, are there any other individuals of the public raising their hand?
I don't see any hands raised this time.
Okay, great. So with that, I'll bring it back to the Gpac for discussion. Chris, I see your hand up.
Yeah. Just let me put it down.
Okay.
It was actually about a point that got brought up a few times in public comment. And it's the section that includes downtown mixed use multifamily neighborhoods. I think well, you can tell me, but it seems like what you were trying to do there was set bookends, because we had been wrestling for so long with how to describe neighborhoods in Lafayette and how to draw differences and how to quantify semi-rural, because it doesn't fit some places, but it does fit a lot of other places. So if I could just confirm that this statement here is not that the whole downtown is full of mixed use multifamily neighborhoods, because I live close to downtown and I live in a single family neighborhood. But I also moved here because I wanted to be in a more diverse neighborhood. So that it was appealing to me. But maybe you guys can just confirm how you came up and were you trying to bookend the kinds of housing that are in Lafayette?
Yeah, Chris, that's well said. It's exactly what we were trying to do, is not to name every neighborhood and the distinct characteristics of each neighborhood, because they all have something that's unique. But as you said, this bookend, this range of one data point to another. And there are multiple points in between there, depending where you live. So instead of making this a very lengthy document, trying to lock in characteristics today of each neighborhood, and that may change over time for very good reasons, we were trying to get this sense of a range and a uniqueness to each neighborhood.
I've got Stella and then Susie.
Thank you. I wanted to say that I thought Grace Dixon's comments on the fourth bullet point in the guiding characteristics really make a lot of sense. And literally it's just rearranging some words, but really enhancing the meaning, making it much more finely focused and I think appropriately focused. So I would say I support that recommendation that she made. And I think that's all for now.
Okay. Susie?
Okay, I'd like to say I also support that. I thought her wording was really excellent, the editing that she had there. But back to that line that we're a little bit stuck on, I think we could just simply rearrange these words as well, because as you just stated, Matt, things could change in the future, and semi-rural, as we've gone back and forth with that word or two words, it might change if we're encouraging things to be, they could put the 80 units and things in there. So anyway, I think it could be from semi-rural and downtown, single family, mixed use, multifamily neighborhoods. So it's the same words, but it's just keeping semi-rural. I mean, right now, maybe it's not multifamily, maybe it is. I don't know if there are some neighborhoods around here that have more than one residence. As a matter of fact, I do know that because where I walk, which I would consider semi-rural because it's up by the reservoir. And there are lots of those neighborhoods that have 2, 3, 4 units on them. You just don't realize that they're homes that have been converted. So those would be considered multifamily multifamily, but they would also be considered semi-rural. So I think it's just maybe moving downtown and semi-rural, just a comma apart or and then move single family to the other side. So what we're talking about is 3 types of uses. We've got single family, we've got mixed use, and we've got multifamily. And that could happen in semi-rural, or it could happen in the downtown. As a matter of fact, it makes us sound a little bit more eclectic, which is kind of nice. So that's my opinion on that. I think that might make the other people who are, bothered by it, and probably those of us who are in single family are the ones who are saying, wait, don't just make it all the downtown. But as I mentioned, there's a lot of neighborhoods that do have more than one residence on them. And I think that's great. I think that's what Lafayette's about, is we are trying to be a little bit more cosmopolitan, a little more urban, but still semi-rural. We still want to keep that, so we don't lose that either.
So if I could, I think it was Stella who asked the question about the bookending. That's kind of what the idea was, without saying that, necessarily the downtown was only mixed use multifamily. So maybe that's something we can kind of, I'm jotting down notes here, as I'm sure Matt and Namratha are as well. So we can pick that up. I've got Namratha and then Carol.
Oh, okay. So, 2 things. I was just wondering about that sentence or that bullet point we were kind of working on. Would some of the problem be fixed if we took out downtown from there and just went semi-rural single family to multi-use mixed family or whatever that other thing was? You take out the downtown, so we don't, because downtown is very complex. There's the single family and there's the multifamily and there's the mixed use. If you take out that downtown term, then I guess we kind of keep the bookend idea without referring to downtown specifically having a certain type of character.
I think
And
that's a great idea. I think you hit the nail on the head there.
If I
and
could,
then, sorry.
go ahead. I'm sorry, Namrata.
The second thing I wanted to do was to clarify a little bit on the outreach that we've done to Acalanes. So about that, we basically just sent a survey very similar to the second survey that we shared with the community residents, and we sent that to the principal of Acalanes so the Acalanes students could take it anytime, I think between like early November and Thanksgiving. And 73 to 75 respondents, like there were 73 to 75 students who responded, and we took their input. I don't see it as we singled them out and said specifically that these 75 are really important or anything. I think we just gave them the same opportunity that we aim to give every resident of Lafayette to contribute. And the best way to do that was through school. And I think we have done quite a bit with outreach on all of these surveys, and we have gotten less than 1,000 respondents, which is not where we want it to be. But I don't see how our outreach to Acalanes has anything to do with that. That's all I had to comment.
Thank you, Namrata. I wanted at some point to make a comment on that comment, but I'm trying to be mindful of what the chair's role is here to make sure other people speak up. So maybe I'll circle back on that in a bit too. I've got Carol and Christine and a couple other folks after that. So Carol, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, I wanted to comment on number 4, protect and enhance. I think it should stay protect and enhance all of them because we have to protect our parklands and trails as well as enhance them. I don't know how we enhance ridgelines, but we certainly enhance our open spaces. We have, over the years acquired more open space. And the same thing in creeks. We have to protect and enhance them. So I think that protect and enhance is important for all those things. From a park and rec perspective, that is what we do.
Yeah.
So I'd like to leave it the way it is, be my suggestion.
Okay. And if I could make a parenthetical note, I know that because I sat in on this, Carol, I jumped in on your PTR session discussion on this. The language around sufficient, adequate parks and so on. We opted for the protect and enhance because enhance seemed to be a bit more had more oomph to it than this concept of adequacy or sufficiency.
Yeah.
That was the idea here. If we wanted it to be aspirational, that was the word choice there. So Carol, thank you.
I think that's good. That is just what we want to do with all of those things.
Okay. I've got Carol, you all set?
Well, I'll make one what Namrata was talking about. I think the problem here is the word semi-rural. This is what we went through. The people out in the communities want semi-rural, and the people downtown, like on Moraga Boulevard, said they are not semi-rural. So if you leave semi-rural in there, which I think you should, because that's the buzzword. So you're talking about semi-rural single family. That's one thing. And then downtown, it is single family. They do not want to be called semi-rural. I think that's how we got into some of this, that they said they were not semi-rural. So I think if you do have the range there, but I don't know how you, without putting downtown single family / etc., I don't know how you fix that situation, that one is semi-rural and the other is downtown.
Okay. Thank you, Carol. I've got Christine, Stella, and then Matt.
So me. Okay, so I agree with Carol. Protect and enhance our parklands, trails. I like that line as it is. I like protect and enhance on all of those things. So I recommend you guys keep that as is. As far as the support our distinct residential areas, I absolutely, we have to keep semi-rural single family. I don't think the only way to include, I think for the downtown people, we have to understand where they're coming from. And I think single family, mixed use, multifamily, well, it should be mixed use, single family and multifamily neighborhoods. And I understand that. And I think we should put that in, but I absolutely think we should keep semi-rural single family and not make semi-rural single family, multifamily, et cetera, et cetera. The neighborhoods here are not going to be happy with that. It's got to be semi-rural single family.
Okay, thank you, Christine. Stella?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I wanted to speak to that bullet point, the residential areas. I think maybe a simple way to do this is just to add in the single family neighborhoods into that downtown part of the sentence. I think that seems like it covers all of the different housing types in that particular location, which is downtown. And that location just happens to be maybe our most urban or urbanized location, which is, I think, the distinction that you're trying to make between the range, the bookends, as we've been hearing them, from semi-rural to most urbanized, which also happens to be our downtown. So that would be my suggestion, to simply acknowledge that there are the single family homes in the downtown.
Okay, thank you, Stella. Matt?
Yeah, a couple things. On the outreach, let's see. Renata, if you could, or Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, we did do one mailer for one of the surveys to all the residents. Is that correct? Okay.
Correct.
And so the comment about whether that we didn't do a mailer is not correct. We did do a mailer. Now, we didn't do it for every single survey because of both the expense as well as the amount of time it takes. But in the chamber, we did reach out through the chamber channels to try to notify as many people as possible who may own property here that have businesses here. And so we did reach people that have businesses here but may not necessarily live here. One of the themes here that we've tried to do is not to dictate policy. And the point that Carol made about protect and enhance the parklands, we tried not to parse that out too finely. We expect the parks commissions and committees to figure out what needs to be enhanced and what needs to be protected, and not trying to parse that out in a way that's dictating those policies. We think that's up to the commissions and the councils. The one other suggestion on the bullet point about the distinct residential areas, as somebody suggested, range from semi-rural single family to take out the word downtown, mixed use multifamily. I wouldn't do that, because I'll guarantee you that we'll have a cascade of comments that we are suggesting that multifamily mixed use ought to be put into the neighborhoods. So that would not be a good idea, in my opinion. So I really have got to emphasize, this is a range. We said it in the document that we wrote earlier. It's here. It is a range, as opposed to identifying every specific neighborhood. We're trying to keep the document concise and compact. So those are a couple of comments that I would add to the discussion. Excuse me. So that's it, Jim.
Okay, thank you. Chris?
Yes, thank you. I also support keeping number 4 as protecting and enhancing. And on the supporting distinct residential areas, can I ask how much right now of the downtown has mixed use residential and commercial? How much would you say?
I don't I don't have a precise number, Chris, unless Sarah or Renata do. I mean, an example might be the retirement homes. Yeah, I'm saying.
Merrill
Oh,
Gardens.
Belterre?
Yeah, Merrill
Right.
Gardens. That is an example
Right.
of mixed use.
Mhm.
And that has been in some of our discussions about, trying to make that more and more of what goes on downtown. But Merrill Gardens is an example of that.
Right. So I guess I asked that because I'm trying to avoid a lot of words, but I also agree that we need the word downtown as a qualifier, because it basically says you will find most of this kind of housing in our downtown area, which is what I think that is in our future. So I would also agree with those who have said that single family should be included in the downtown description of housing. But I am concerned that we're getting very wordy. Possibly mixed use could go, but I also know that future plans involve commercial on the bottom floor and housing on upper floors. So if we are trying to paint a vision of a future Lafayette, it would be all of those things in the downtown.
Got a wording suggestion, but maybe before I do, Chris, I don't want to interrupt you. Do you have?
No, I'm finished.
Okay, I've got Stella, and then I want to move this to closure here. So Stella, please go ahead.
Just to follow up on what Chris was saying, maybe just to add 2 words. So downtown mixed use / single and multifamily neighborhoods. So we're not adding too much with just and single.
Right.
Yeah.
And single comma multifamily.
Yeah. Thank you. And not to make a camel, which is a horse drawn by committee. But if you, I think the notion maybe where it says semi-rural single family single family 2, then drop downtown, mixed use, drop the / single and multifamily downtown neighborhoods or something like that. Matt, you're shaking your head no.
Jim, I think if we do that, people will interpret that we are pushing multi-use into the neighborhoods. That's my reaction to it.
Yeah. That would be an unintended consequence.
Absolutely.
That's what we were trying to avoid with this structure.
Exactly.
So I've got Stella and Susie.
Yeah, just again to reiterate that semi-rural to downtown is a kind of continuum of urbanism, and so I think it's appropriate, like what you were saying, you wanted to bookend all the varying types of the form of our city. And then the actual housing types, the single family, mixed use, multifamily, I think we've probably sorted out a good solution for that. So I would advocate for keeping it as is, with just the addition of the single and multifamily neighborhoods.
So I'm clear. What you'd recommend is where it says semi-rural, single family to downtown mixed use, maybe drop single and multifamily neighborhoods.
That's right. That's right. So 2 downtown mixed use / single and multifamily neighborhoods. And single with a hyphen after it, so we know that it's connected also to the family.
Okay. I've got Susie, and then hopefully we can move to closure here.
Okay, so I like her suggestion, Stella's suggestion. I think that really just kind of tightens that up. But I do have one question. I thought now with the new California mandates that multi-residential could be anywhere. So why are we saying that it won't happen in the semi-rural? I know nobody wants it to happen, but we don't really want it on our street either. So why are we mincing words here and being like, oh, okay, we won't have it in your neighborhood? I know that was in some of the letters that were stated too, where people were saying, oh, well, that's all great for the downtown, but I don't want that in my neighborhood. But isn't that now the mandate that it can be anywhere?
it could happen. You're right, Susie. And we're not saying that it won't happen, and we're not endorsing that it should happen.
Right.
What we're saying is there's a range, and
Right.
that's what it is. It's a range. That's a
Yeah.
characteristic of our city, is this range of different types of neighborhoods with different types of housing.
Yeah. So I think Stella's solution is kind of perfect that it just, puts in that for those of us so that people maybe who are moving here and look at the mission statement and go, oh, great. I want to be in the downtown. I want to be in a single family home. We're saying, yes, we do have that. It's just saying what we have, which I think clarifies things.
Okay. I've got, Chris, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I just was going back in history on this particular idea. And in the beginning, saying something about supporting distinct residential areas came from wanting to use or somehow include the semi-rural feel. And so I think, and this point actually went through a lot when I was chair, it went through a lot of changes. So I think it's, we're not telegraphing anything that may happen in the future by saying this. I think we're just saying that Lafayette will support these different, very different residential areas. We all live in completely different areas from each other. So I think that's a very good thing for the city to be able to say in its vision statement. And that's all I have.
Yeah. So this is a great discussion. I'd invite you all onto the subcommittee, except that we blow our Brown Act limitations, so we're not going to do that. But this has been a good discussion. I'd like to bring us to a point of closure. It sounds like really the text we're really talking through here is this component of this, like next to last bullet. I really haven't, appreciate Carol and Christine's comments on the fourth one. There was a suggestion that Grace had raised. I think we've kind of taken care of that. So really it's this last item. And I don't know, between with Matt and Namratha, because you're both on the subcommittee and have been so involved in drafting this, I guess the question would be if we modify the text, or it's a semi-rural single family to downtown, mixed use, single and multifamily neighborhoods, that kind of does acknowledge that there is a range in the downtown. We were focused on the range of like neighborhoods downtown, and within the downtown there's a range too. It's all, I think, acknowledging this is a much more complex entity than, any one single word can use to describe. Matt or Namratha, I don't know what your take on that is.
Frankly, it kind of confuses me. So my idea of this whole thing was it's kind of going from semi-rural, the most rural and semi-rural people, houses and properties, to the most urban feel, right? And so I feel like adding like the mixed use, the single family, all of that is kind of complicating that point on that side. And so I don't know how to keep it as a clean range. But that's just, I guess that's my perspective on it.
Yeah.
I personally feel like if we got rid of the downtown and kept the rest of it the same, I think it would capture the range fine. Less words to add or remove. But.
Matt,
I would not get rid of the downtown for the reasons I've said a couple of times. I think adding the single / multifamily neighborhood that Stella suggested, that's fine. I think it makes the sentence a bit clumsy, to be honest with you, but if it helps us come to some closure on this, I'm personally okay with it.
Yeah. So I kind of feel like we're at the 2-yard line. I really want to punch this in because we've got a pretty substantial agenda following.
Yeah, Jim, if I could maybe make a motion.
Yep.
That the Gpac approve the vision and mission and guiding characteristic statement with the adjustment that Stella suggested, Hopefully, Renata or Sarah have captured that. And that we authorize that this be submitted to the city council for their consideration. That would be my suggestion, or my motion.
And before we do that, can I just make sure that this is?
Sure. Stella, does that capture it?
Yeah, that does. Just the point to add the hyphen after single, so you know that it refers to single family and multifamily without saying family twice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it should be attached to the single, so the space between. Perfect. I think that
single
that's
and
right.
multifamily. Yes.
Okay.
So my motion is that Gpac vote on this for approval to submit to the city council for their consideration.
Is that a motion, Matt?
That's a motion, Carol.
That is motion. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you, Carol. So Matt Peace makes the motion to approve the vision, mission, guiding characteristic statement as modified. Carol Singer seconds. Sarah or Renata, can you call the roll, please, for the vote?
Absolutely. Carol Singer,
Here. Yes.
Amrita Castanati,
Yes.
John Jenkins,
Yes.
Stella Weatherspoon,
Yes.
Matt Pease,
Yes.
Beth Needle,
Yes.
Jim Cervantes,
Yes.
Mike Kim is absent. Susie Kelly,
Yes.
Christine Rasmussen,
Yes.
and Chris Lee.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Motion carries, and it's unanimous. I kind of want to make, before we move on to other topics, I do want to say a few things, one of which is thank you very much to the other individuals on the subcommittee. Matt and Amrata have put in long hours on this. Our consultant, Jamie Harris, was also a key part of this, along with Sarah Allen and Renata Robles. It was a long effort with a lot of outreach. And I think Matt touched on that earlier, but a considerable effort to try to sort of get a sense from the community as to how they view the way we are now and looking ahead into the decades in the future when another Gpac will come along and maybe look at this again. And there's also many, many members of the community who had a role in this, whose input was thoughtful and in many cases passionate. We didn't take all of that, but everyone was listened to. And those are voices that we really tried to sort of like work their thoughts into this as best we could, while trying to keep it from going on to 3 pages. So with that, thank you all very much. And I would like to now move us on to
First, can I just thank you all? You probably can't thank yourself as the chair, but I'm sure I speak for all of us when I thank you 3 for all your work. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Appreciate that. Okay, well, with a brief pat on the back, let's move on. So we've got the next item for discussion, the housing element, the programs for infrastructure, special populations, and sustainability. This is the item that was brought before us at the last meeting. We talked about it. The idea was that members of the Gpac were to provide their detailed comments to staff by December 7th. And the idea was to sort of go through this here. And as I understand the process, we'll go through it, try to basically ink the document, so to speak, put it in the processed file where it'll accumulate with other ones. And eventually we'll go through all this again and it'll get to the Planning Commission. So this is another widget on the production line that we are going to be cranking through here. So Sarah, I don't know, Sarah or Renata, was there any presentation you had for this? Or are we just going to talk it through, getting last comments and then stamp it?
We were anticipating the latter. So you do have the programs outlined in the staff report starting on page 3. So that kind of removes all the noise, the sort of revised or remove or add. So it's just the ones that would show up in the document itself. I'm happy to share my screen and go through that. I would encourage the group to kind of, again, think high level. I don't know that we have time to sort of wordsmith these ones at the meeting. If you did have comments, we would have expected them to come in December 7th.
Thank you. So we're looking for higher level comments here. I do have a wordsmithing thing, but having heard you say that, maybe I should hold off on that. Carol Singer, you have your hand up.
Yes, the PTR Commission considered this at their last meeting, but their comments did not get in time in the deadline. So I will, their comments will be considered in the next round, whatever we do with this. Okay, just wanted to make that announcement. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on this? Stella's got her hand up.
Yeah, just to report that from Transcert, the same situation as PTR. So we're going to be hearing this topic tomorrow at our meeting. It'll be the second time. And so we'll just prepare whatever comments come out of that, and we will send them to Sarah and Renata. And then I assume that will just get sort of put into the hopper as the process moves on. Okay. Very good.
Great, thank you. Other questions from members of the Gpac? Because I think this, I've got it, Sarah, just to check with you, I need to open the floor for public comments on this.
Yes, you do.
Great. Any other questions from members of the Gpac? Don't see any hands raised, so I'd like to open this to public comment.
If you would like to make a public comment on this item, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen, or *9 if you're calling in. I don't see any hands raised.
Okay, bringing this back to Gpac.
Hand raised.
Sorry?
One hand just raised.
Okay, great.
Carol Reef raised her hand and is being invited to become a panelist.
Okay, Carol, welcome. Do we have? Oh, it's not Carol.
Hi, so this is Jeff Gilman. I'm
Welcome.
borrowing Carol's computer for the moment, sorry. Didn't have time to change the name. So I would like to offer a comment. And in particular, it has to do with goal number 3. And in goal number 3, the broad topic is energy conservation, sustainability, and climate change. You talk about infrastructure, and I'd just like to point out that I realize this is about the housing element, but that buildings don't live in a vacuum. I think it's acknowledged that buildings have an impact on climate. Buildings use energy, that has an impact on climate. But the one thing I don't see in here is any acknowledgement of the term that we call green infrastructure. And a lot of that has to do with things like stormwater runoff, and to take green approaches as opposed to the opposite of that would be gray infrastructure, so the traditional storm drains and hardscape type engineering. So I realize also that this topic of green infrastructure will be touched upon in other elements of the general plan revision, like utilities, like natural resources. But I would recommend that it is at least acknowledged in here, that it's not just hard infrastructure like roads, sidewalks, pathways, but it's also green infrastructure. And also, some of you may know, but not all, that Lafayette, as are all cities and Contra Costa County and other cities and counties in the Bay Area under their stormwater permit, are required to submit a green infrastructure plan. And Lafayette has already done that. So this is not, although it's fairly new, it's not totally new. And I guess my recommendation to boil this all down would be just to add the word green infrastructure under the green building incentives, or just find some place to acknowledge it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. That's a very good comment. Sarah, I just asked the question. There is within the broader general plan, I mean, we're talking about the housing element component right now, but there is an infrastructure part to that too, right? Or
Right, so I think what Jeff's talking about right now is currently in the land use element of the general plan.
Thank you.
So we can talk about if that's where it belongs, but historically that's where it has lived.
So to address the comment, like with respect to drainage and those other sort of infrastructure issues, that would reside not here but there. But the point with respect to green building incentives and having kind of looking at that language again would be likely the place where this would sit with respect to the housing element. Is that fair? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out where it would go in this particular, and I don't. Yeah, well, we can.
Okay, that's something worth looking at. Great.
Okay.
Thank you again. Are there other public comments or questions?
I don't see any other hands raised at this time.
So I'll bring it back to the Gpac here. So that, and like I said, I had a comment too, but I don't want to type everyone on that. It's kind of a nerdy public finance one. So any other comments on this document from the Gpac, or else we can say, okay, let's kind of note that we've got PTR and Transfer coming in with some comments. We'll pick those up later when we do the final run through, and the comment from the public as well. So I think with that, we could say this piece is moved to the next pile. Is that, we don't need a motion for that, Sarah, correct?
I think we would like a motion,
okay,
just to kind of, close review of this and bring it back during the comprehensive review.
Okay, so thank you. So I'll entertain a motion to, Sarah, can you help me? What was the terminology that you were suggesting here?
So a motion to close review of the infrastructure, sustainability, and special populations programs of the housing element, and bring them back during the comprehensive review.
Thank you. Said better than I could. I'll entertain a motion to that effect, please.
I'll support that.
Matt makes the motion. The second? Don Jenkins seconds. Thank you. Okay, so we'll call the vote on that item, please.
Right. Carol Singer.
Oh, aye.
Namrata Koslanati.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Don Jenkins.
Yes.
Stella Weatherspoon.
Aye.
Matt Pease.
Yes.
Beth Needle.
Aye.
Jim Cervantes.
Aye.
Mike Kim is absent still. Susie Kelly.
Yes.
Christine Rasmussen.
Aye.
And Chris Lee.
Yes.
All right, unanimously, thank you.
Okay, thank you all very much. Another widget on the production line. So we'll now move on to the next component of the housing element relating to affordability, height density, design aesthetics. And I think there's a presentation here as well. Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
That.
Turning it to staff.
Excellent. Great. So we're on to the next set of programs: portability, height density, and design and aesthetics. So that's what we'll be discussing this evening. So as it relates to affordability, we all know that we have to plan for a certain number of units, but we also have to plan for specific levels of affordability. And you can see those percentages as outlined here. And keeping in mind sort of that we are, again, planning for housing, not producing housing, but all of those components that go into the production of housing and planning for housing. And sort of where they overlap is the entitlement and city approvals process. So that's where we have the most control. There are several things to consider as we look to affordability. The major one being development costs, right? So all of the things that go into developing affordable units and the costs associated with that. Some of those things we have control over and some of those things we do not. And then another consideration is preserving as well as producing those units. Some of the tools that we have are inclusionary. Obviously, funding and subsidies are an important factor to address those levels of affordability. So these are sort of the big tools that we've had so far: inclusionary zoning and density bonus. And then these are a sample of the proposed affordability programs that are included in your packet. One of which being establishing a plan for the housing fund, which will relate to the funding component or the funding consideration, or I guess problem we might call it. And then permit ready ADUs would address potentially the process and cost components of affordable housing. And then requirements to ensure federal subsidies can be used, right? So that basically, so Section 8 vouchers could be used for developments that they're not able to discriminate. So that also goes to addressing the issues and problems of affordability. So those are some examples of the programs that are outlined in your report that we're asking you to look at and provide comments on this evening. And Renata is going to talk about height and density.
Thanks. Next slide, please. So again, as a refresher of what density is and isn't. So density is a measure of how many units are in a typically an acre, so a certain area. And there's a lot of different components that feed into density. So it will depend on the unit size, the lot area, the number of or the open space on a lot will all affect the potential density yield of a parcel. And we all are familiar with visiting different cities and how they can look and feel differently based on density. But the thing we don't see behind that is also the impacts on affordability. So what you are allowed to build on a lot will affect the cost to develop it and will affect the ultimate purchase price or rental price of a unit. And then finally, again, height and density are both tools that we have to be able to move towards that RHNA and allocation and produce the housing our community needs. This slide will be familiar to you all from our economics of development presentation with updated figures courtesy of Mike Kim in session. And so we can kind of see through the scale of the impact that different construction types have on the development costs. And those construction types are dependent on the zoning that's allowed. So here you can see garden apartments have an average density of 24 units to the acre. Mid-rise is closer to 100. For only 200K more, you can get almost 4 times the number of units. So it's not to say that you'll always get 100 units, but you can see that cost differential is pretty minor compared to when you go to high-rise, which is way more expensive to build and is not likely to be what we'll be looking to do in Lafayette. So next slide. So linked to that density consideration in terms of construction is, we also are looking for a variety of housing types. And that was part of the goal, I believe, under affordability too, was variety. And so there's this problem throughout jurisdictions in California of the missing middle. So it's kind of those small, lower scale apartment buildings, but that still kind of fit into that existing urban fabric and provide that more moderate income. As you read in the staff report, those extremely low income and low income units require significant subsidy. And we are looking, part of our proposed programs are to look into ways that in our city it would be effective to develop revenue streams to support those subsidies. We don't currently have those tools, but we do have the tool of zoning. And we can effectuate change in this missing middle zone through zoning for height and density. So here's an example that you've seen before of Chestnut Street. So this is actually a 5-unit building, just looks like a 2-story home right in the downtown. So we just want to kind of keep that in mind, that it doesn't always have to be, you know, big, tall things, but there's opportunities in that middle range too. And that's what we're trying to do through some of these programs we proposed. And it's a sampling again of some of the things. So we want to get a better understanding of how building height and how we might define building height impacts development feasibility. So again, that's a way that zoning can affect a development and the production of affordable housing. Small lot consolidation, we learned from our housing element workshops in going through that opportunity site worksheet, how the lot size can affect what can get built there. And so looking to find ways to consolidate small lots to be able to assist affordable housing to be developed. And then reviewing our downtown densities. So changing what can be built there and influencing the cost of production, and then ideally lowering the cost on the back end to the ultimate end user. So kind of trying to look for the opportunities to have more refined densities in the downtown to make sure we're keeping the community character, but also planning for our housing needs. So finally, design aesthetics, the last category for tonight. It's a pretty limited category of what we can change at this point under SB 330. This law put into place a requirement that cities can only review projects against what are called objective design standards. So these are kind of uniform criteria that you can consider projects against. And that's backdated to 2018. And so, or rather, sorry, we adopted downtown design standards in 2019, and we are planning to further develop these for the downtown, and then potentially expand to single family, but we need to see more guidance on that. So that's the one program for this category, because it is pretty limited in what we can do at this point. So again, or did you want to go, Sarah, through this?
Either way, just wanted to remind folks that when we're looking at programs, that we want to make sure that we are evaluating them against the program criteria that we established as a group, right? So is the program meeting or furthering one or more of the goals? Does it align with the city's vision and mission statement? Is it within the purview of the city? Is it financially feasible? Is there public support or objection? Is it consistent or in conflict with an existing city approved plan or document? Can it be accomplished or progress made in the 8-year cycle of the housing element? So that one's specific to the housing element. What laws govern this program? Is it required? Are there overriding considerations or other factors that make inclusion of this program critical? So obviously there's some judgment call on some of these. It's not, you know, all yes or all no, but considerations when we're looking to add, remove, adjust programs. So in terms of next steps, we're seeking your review of the programs, and feel free to ask questions or ask for additional information. We're asking for feedback prior to December 20th, and that tight time frame is primarily due to the closure of the city offices and your next meeting being January 4th. So ultimately, we're asking all of the Gpac members the commission, chamber, and nonprofit reps to determine whether or not these items have relevance to their committees and commissions, and if relevant, solicit input and provide that to us. Obviously, that's a very tight deadline, so I know that's not necessarily going to happen. So any additional comments would, again, come back through the comprehensive review. So detailed suggestions from Gpac members should be submitted by 12 p.m. on Monday, December 20th. And I think with that, we are available for any questions.
Great. Thank you both very much. That was very helpful. So we'll have questions from members of the Gpac, open up to the public again, come back, acknowledging that this is the first bite at this apple. And we'll come back again. So Chris, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to talk about the affordability section of the staff report. And let's see, at the bottom of the second paragraph, it says the staff is proposing programs to collect more information on tools available to generate revenues that can subsidize development costs to produce affordable housing units at a range of affordability levels. This is this. It sounds like the city is looking at possibly becoming a part of the financing for affordable units. Is that right?
I think we've identified the affordability or the funding piece as a primary reason for lack of affordable housing. And we do have an existing affordable housing fund. So it's a matter of, identifying ways to increase that revenue and then identifying a plan in order to determine how to spend that revenue.
And I'll just reference another part of the staff report, which talked about the redevelopment agencies. So the city previously had funds and would contribute towards affordable housing developments like Belterre. And so it's something we've done before and other jurisdictions do, but we've acknowledged that need. And that's a critical missing piece most of the time is the finance funding.
Is the city planning on sort of ramping up that program to become more involved in financing?
Well, so the redevelopment agencies were dissolved in 2012. So we no longer have access to those funds. But much of our programs proposed at this time are to find the tools for us to get money to then put forward for developments to happen. Because we only have about $1.6 million in our housing trust fund, which may sound like a lot, but when you think of a new unit being produced costing $900,000, it doesn't go a long way. So we want to be able to find a way of having ongoing funds to support affordable housing. So we are looking to ramp it up in the means of collecting money to go towards affordable housing.
I guess I have no background in this. Maybe Jim, I think, has background in public financing, but can you describe some of the ways that a city might do that?
Are you asking Jim or?
Oh, and either staff or Jim.
Well, Jim did put forward a suggestion as part of the last set of programs.
So I guess I'd say, really without redevelopment, I mean, the pillar that was underlying much of affordable housing done by cities was completely yanked away. I mean, I think what you have in reality is if to the extent that a city or community has a housing trust fund, you can use that as part of a means as a local match to leverage other funding. Because what we have is a drop in the bucket. But when you combine that with other resources that probably a nonprofit developer could bring in, tax credits and other sources, there will be a new county pot of funds for affordable housing. You maybe get something done. That's really the only way I think that a city like Lafayette can do something is if we join forces with other players to leverage what we've got, which is admittedly not a lot. And I think that's the game.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I've got Matt, followed by Christine.
Thanks, Jim. I've got a couple of questions. I'd submitted these to staff earlier. On the affordability on 6A, you talk about deferring development fees, and I'm just curious, how long is it deferred? How big of impact is this? Is this a big deal? Or give me some sense of the magnitude here.
So typically it's deferred to the hold on final inspection, so prior to occupancy.
Okay.
Whereas traditionally it's done before they even get a building permit.
Okay.
So it helps the developer kind of be able to use that money for other things and or get some additional financing before it's due. So it doesn't actually reduce the fees; it just delays the time frame for when they would be collected.
What's the typical magnitude of this? Is this millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands?
Great question. It depends on the type of development, right? So it depends. They're directly related to the impacts. So it's dependent on the number of units, the amount of impervious surfaces, those types of things. So it could be a couple 100,000, could be low millions.
Okay. Moving down, on 6D, you talk about different parking standards for different housing types. When you do that assessment, do you assess the impact on the commercial businesses surrounding the housing?
You're thinking that the residents would then use the commercial parking lots for parking?
That might be. I mean, does somebody assess what that's going to do to the businesses in the area that have parking for their customers, whether it's street parking or lot parking?
So oftentimes I would say sort of when folks need parking for their residents is perhaps the opposite hours that a business might be open, but that certainly could be, one aspect that we consider as part of the study.
Okay, so that maybe that's something we should be more explicit about, is that potentially?
Yeah, we can include that as part of that.
Let's see. On the ADUs going down, this is number, I'm going to go blind, 6J, ADUs. Does the city do an assessment of how many of those ADUs are actually rentals and how many of them are other use?
Apologies, I was making a note. Which was the
6J
J.
On ADUs is, do we know how many of those are actually rented out to people, and what are the rescues? Are they? Is there kind of another category? They could be guest houses, they could be offices, they could be workout centers. Do we know that?
We don't know that.
Okay.
We don't know that.
Okay. Jumping back up to 6G on retention of affordable rental units. Do we have the ability to assess like a conversion fee when a landlord converts from affordable rental to selling condos, making them condos? Is there any type of assessment that the city could impose that might encourage the owner to keep it as a rental as opposed to converting to a condo?
Don't know the answer to that question, but it's a note I can ask the city attorney, or I don't know if Diana has a comment.
Okay.
New rules are in place that say essentially that if a unit is being converted from rental to for sale, there has to be an analysis of whether or not that person, what the income of that person is, and whether or not they can have right of first refusal to occupy the unit as a for sale project, or whether they get relocation benefits. So I don't know a lot about that, but that's the new law.
Right. And so I have read about the relocation benefits. But I guess what I was also thinking about is trying to give the owner, whether you call it an incentive or a disincentive is debatable, where they'd have to pay a fee that might go to this housing fund if they converted to condos. Even if they go through that
we can definitely look into that. Yeah,
okay.
Sure.
The other one, I'm jumping ahead to 8A, downtown densities. And I think we are looking at that as a city. I just want to make sure are we considering additional fees for a height increase that could be earmarked for either infrastructure or affordable housing. So if somebody does go up, even if they're doing it for a density bonus, there's a fee that's on there because they're creating value by going up. Instead of the city just giving away that air, there's a fee that's associated with it, and the city in turn could use it for infrastructure and or affordable housing. Is that a possibility?
I think to also ask the city attorney.
Okay, thank you. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Christine?
Okay, I'm gonna try not to jump around, but I think I'm gonna be jumping around. Okay, let's see. So I was looking at the staff report. And on page 5 of 7, you'd mentioned, are you suggesting that we should create more rentals then than homeowners? In paragraph, let's see, it's under affordability, 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph. Let's see, something about, let's see, you wrote, instead of renting, staff finds the cost of purchasing a home instead of renting can often be too high for low-income households and creates a barrier for entry to living in Lafayette. So are you suggesting that most of the things we're doing would be more focused towards renting or the creation of rental units?
I wouldn't say that. I would note that we don't have very many rental units. The most of what's coming now is condos. And so it's just a matter of maintaining existing rental units that we do have and allowing for or encouraging new rental units so that we do have that mix available for folks.
So, okay, so we're not pushing rental units more than actually home ownership. We're still trying to think of ways to help first-time home buyers, and that would be one of our concerns, right? That we'll be discussing and keeping in our discussions, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Housing choice for
housing choice. Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure, it just seemed like a lot of emphasis on rentals. And we do want to create home ownership, right? Because that's helpful too for low income to build wealth, right? Generational wealth. So, okay. Let's see here. The other one was, let's see, page 6. Oh, on page 6 of 7 in the staff report, talking about I think it's ADUs in here. Let's see, where is that? I can't find things now. Have we considered doing, I know I looked at Danville at one point and they had these pre-approved designs, to help reduce the costs for the person interested in building an ADU. Is that something we're going to do as well as possibly? I think they had 3 designs, if I'm not mistaken, that were kind of pre-stamped and all they had to do is say, I'll take A, B, or C.
Yep, that's included as one of the programs. Mm-hmm.
It is one of the programs. Okay, good. Let's see here. Then I was looking at 6C on the worksheets here, and it says, what does it say that? Oh, I had one question. What is the retain the public art requirement on 6C, update inclusionary housing and density bonus? And it says add new program. It says retain public art requirement.
So currently,
why is that?
Currently in our inclusionary, or I guess it's density bonus, there are various concessions and waivers that developers can ask for in order to, so basically waivers from existing regulations. And there's various tiers for which those would go. So it'd be staff level or planning commission or city council. So for instance, if they're asking for a waiver for the height, it would go to city council. So the public art fee was listed as one of those waivers and concessions or incentives at the staff level. That's something the staff could.
So what does that mean? So like a developer could say, I want to, sorry, my dog is whining, go away. So what you're saying is that they in lieu of, so if they wanted to, I mean, does that mean that they're gonna put in an art installation, or that they don't have to do the art installation?
Sorry, apologies. So yes, so certain projects of certain sizes require public art as part of the development. And one of the concessions or incentives would be to waive that fee for that installation. The Public Art Committee obviously had some concerns with that. And so wanting to maintain allowance of some, like that they would get some financial contribution for the public art. It wouldn't be a full waiver, was their request. But that we would adjust that.
So are we gonna discuss that, or is that a done deal?
You can definitely discuss it. The Public Art Committee has weighed in, but you can certainly discuss it.
Like as a group, or say that we think we could leave that, meaning that they should be able to use that as one of their waivers. And 100%, right? Can I say that now? Like, I think it'd be a good idea if we left that and that they can use that as one of their waivers. Am I misunderstanding that?
We can't, so it's going to be collaborative with the Public Art Committee, right? But yes, I can take your notes and we can talk with them about that.
And then the other thing on that item is you said remove city council review from section 63611 LMC. Why can't we keep that?
So that was
actually, council should be able to say something.
That was actually direction from the city council. So there are specific limitations on the number of meetings that we can hold for particular projects. So we can only have 5 meetings. And so we were finding that we were needing to go to design review at least twice, planning commission at least twice, and then city council. But city council thought it might be best served if design review and planning commission could have more time to massage and make it a better project.
Okay.
I thought it was state law how many meetings you could have.
That's correct.
Okay, there's also a, let's see, hold on a minute. So you said the city council said no on that, or took it out? All right, that just doesn't seem like a good idea. It seems like we should have one last say on it. So can we discuss that too?
Yep, all of these are draft. So it's up for the group discussion.
Okay, I'd like to keep that in. I'd like the city council to be able to review it. And then the in lieu fees, I've heard about these in lieu fees. I think that's also in this one. And every time I read about it, I've read about it in some other cities and I can't remember which ones, but the in lieu fees seem to be really low. And I don't think that's a good idea to have that in there because it never seems to match up to make up for the loss of a potential low-income house. So I would rather not have in lieu fees, actually. And then if we do it, it would have to be kind of commensurate with the changes in market value. You know, it has to be a market level or market rate house. It can't just be a low income because it, like, I think I read somewhere one of them said like $50,000 or something like that. And that to me is not a good deal. I think, you know, they should still have to put in low income housing.
Where
are
you?
So that is also 6C, and it says revised new objective, conduct a fee study to establish inclusionary housing in lieu fees and revise the existing inclusionary housing ordinance. And what I'm saying is the in lieu fees that I've seen in other cities are ridiculously low. Like one of them I saw was like $50,000 per unit. And that, I mean, I think that's just nothing. So if we did use that, they would have to be much higher. And I would say we don't use them at all. Because I'd rather them make the low income units.
And I will advise that, so currently we don't have an in lieu fee. We are requiring that folks actually build the affordable units. The trouble with that is that we don't have, basically they have to build 7 units or more in order for it to trigger a full inclusionary unit. And so the in lieu fee would be for a portion of units that they're not and actually providing, so that it is a small amount of money, but it would potentially accumulate to help with the housing fund.
Okay, well, I think we ought to revisit that. I just don't feel like literally the one that I saw was 50,000. That was just not enough. So
if I could piggyback on Christine's question.
yeah.
So right now, 7 units or more, the inclusionary zoning kicks in. If you're at 5 or 6 units, nothing. That's the current status.
That is correct.
So this would force anyone from the 1 to 6 bracket to kick in something as a mitigation, which would likely go to the housing fund. That's the concept. So this is a new thing. I wasn't aware of that, but.
I'll also note it does actually call for that in the inclusionary housing ordinance itself, but the fee study has to be done and implementation of it.
Okay. Then I wanted to question, I think Matt already talked about the parking on 6D, but I also wanted to ask, and I also had a concern about what about the loss of parking for the businesses down there. That's a pretty big deal. So I wanted to bring that up for discussion. And then also I wanted to find out about, could you add in here, I'm a little concerned too, we're trying to get electric cars in here. So is this going to be including possibly parking for electric cars? Because if we start taking away the options for electric car parking with parking for those vehicles, I mean, isn't the whole point of California trying to electrify everything and get electric cars? So in other words, can we make this a little more generic maybe at the parking so it's not so specific, so we're not leaving out electric car options in there?
So I will just note that California Building Code does now require either buildings be electric EV charging ready or have EV charging in them. So that's already a rule in place that we do not control. So it's required whenever a new building is built. And that would
So
be required as part of parking.
So do those electric car spots then take away from the regular car spots? So if we have, we say, okay, we're in the mile of public transportation, so you don't have to put any parking in there, but we would have a minimum of 10 spots for electric cars, or what are those numbers on that? People are going to have gas cars. I mean, they're just going to have it. So if we eliminate all the parking, just have electric, I don't know. I guess I don't know enough about that that law there. How many parking spots is it?
So I guess I just want to get your main concern, which is making sure that there is enough, or whether or not the electric car spaces count towards the regular,
that's one of the things I'm wondering about. And then also what Matt said is, we get rid of parking. What about the businesses downtown too? That's a very big concern also. Let's see here. So if someone else wants to take a crack at it, I've got some other stuff that I need to figure out where I'm at now. I'm confused with my notes.
Thanks, Christine. Don and then Stella.
I just had, let's see, am I on?
Yes.
I just had a couple of questions in regards to other cities like Lafayette. How are they meeting these requirements? I would assume that Palo Alto and there are many communities around the San Francisco Bay or even in Southern California. And this is a statewide requirement, isn't it? And so what are others doing?
You mean in order to meet RENA?
Yes.
Yeah. So we did take a look at some of the other jurisdictions' housing elements as well, and incorporated some where we thought would be, could be applicable to Lafayette. I know Diana works with several other jurisdictions, so maybe she has a thought on that, but I think we're all trying to struggle through it.
Okay. I assume there's no easy answer. The other, okay, go ahead. She's here now. Well, you have anything to add, Diane?
No, I think that actually Lafayette is doing really well in terms of, coming up with programs and policies to address the issues. And there are other jurisdictions that are really at a disadvantage because they don't have the sort of mechanisms available to create the kind of, what's the word I want? They're not getting to this level of height and density, et cetera, that you guys are. So I feel like Lafayette is doing much better in many ways than most jurisdictions that I work with, of which I have, 5 or 6 that I've got going on right now. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, well, it's about what I expected might be the answer. The other question that I have, I heard you mention earlier about using tax shelter, or not tax shelter, but qualified charitable deductions. And we have a Lafayette Community Foundation, and is this a possible respite to receive funds for this sort of thing, and allowing those who are interested in supporting this as a charitable cause for our community to let people know about this?
Typically not. I think the most important thing is nonprofit developers of housing to really create programs and projects that would really meet the needs. They're the ones that are going to get, a tax waiver, an income tax waiver. They're the ones that are going to get tax credits, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the organizations like Eden, who did Belterre, and Midpen, who's on the west side of the bay, et cetera. Those are the jurisdiction or the organizations that are really going to, really show up and create stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Stella?
Thank you. I have a question about 6D parking standards. Are the standards pertaining to like a minimum or maximum parking requirement, or for type of use of parking? So for example, like the electric vehicle charging, car share, motorcycle spots, bicycle spots, et cetera.
Ultimately it's a study to determine what makes the most sense. And so all of those factors could be a consideration, the number and the type.
Okay. And then what about the California density bonus law? Because I thought it was updated in 2021 to include a maximum parking requirement as well as special parking requirements for developments that had a certain percentage of low income or were proximate to a major transit stop, which for us would be BART. So the state already has some pretty specific maximum requirements. So what is the city's study goal? Is it to, I guess I'm just confused. If the state has a set of guidelines or really requirements that developers can take advantage of, then what would the city's study be looking to implement?
Right, I think we were sort of just looking for ways to incentivize folks, because we know that parking is a high cost item, especially if you have to underground it. But certainly we can take a look at those requirements and make sure it's consistent.
Okay, yeah, it just seemed like maybe the state's already covered it. So I guess looking at that really carefully first before going into a study might be worthwhile. So like, for example, one of the requirements was things with at least 11% very low income, 20% low income within half mile of BART could have 0.5 spaces per unit. So that's a pretty considerable limitation that's out there. But thank you for clarifying that.
Okay, Christine, I see your hand up, but let me give Matt the floor and then you've got it. You're coming back again.
Yeah, in fact, it's something that, I mentioned and Christine mentioned about fees, and maybe Diana, you've got some insights. Diana, you've got some insights into this. Is there a way for us to think about, if we raise fees for height or parking and things like that, we may raise some money that could be used on infrastructure and low-cost housing, but then we end up making our units so expensive that we exasperate the affordability issue, or we actually kill off the demand for housing in this area. How do I think about that, those trade-offs between those two, Diana?
That's a great question. And, I don't have an answer for that. I know that the Turner Center is actually working on a modeling process and where you could input, various zoning attributes and whether or not that would result in greater possibility for development or not. But it's not ready for like everybody in the Bay Area, right? It's a great question, and I totally respect that, and I feel like there's some of that we can actually ask developers of, where we can get their input to sort of weigh these various things.
Yeah, I mean,
right now, though, there's not like a rule of thumb, which I'd love to have, but we don't.
Yeah, because it would help me if somebody said, look, once you get over 10% fees, I'm just making up a number, you're really going to start to affect affordability and
right.
demand and things like that. I have no idea what that data point is, and that sure would be helpful. But
I don't think that anybody knows what that is, but the Turner Center is trying to do that right now. Okay. There are two different things that are at work here. One is, can we get a certified housing element, regardless of whether it meets, well, two things. Does it meet the requirements and whether it's feasible? Those are two different questions.
Right.
And so your question is really important. And I don't know that we have an answer for that yet. So if we're trying to get a certifiable housing element, that's one thing. Whether or not, this actually impacts actual development and so forth is another question.
Does the state concern itself with both questions?
No, it's mostly interested in the mathematical equation. Can you meet the RHNA allocation regardless of, with some, there's some sort of interest in, okay, are you going to redevelop a gas station? That's kind of out of the question. But if there are other things we can justify, like El Charro. El Charro is like a prime site as far as HCD is concerned. So it's really kind of, it's a combination of our best guess plus a mathematical exercise for the housing element. But your question is a little bit beyond that.
Okay, and the state wouldn't concern itself if we put on some big fee on the El Charro site. They just want to know that we could put a certain number of units on the El Charro
It's
site.
a combination of that, but also if the fees the city is levying against multifamily versus single family is different, like multifamily has per unit is higher than single family, that's an issue. We're working on that with other jurisdictions right now in Contra Costa County. So that to me is less important in terms of what we're doing here.
I think it might be considered a governmental constraint if we were to add
exactly. Yeah.
That then they would want us to adjust that.
Right.
So.
Okay. Thank you.
But I will point out that we do have a program 8C that is, directed at kind of getting at least some information about this from developers to try and understand that relationship. And that can be part of the consideration is, cost benefit of more height and density versus the ultimate affordability.
Okay. Thank you.
Christine, you've got your hand up.
Okay, let's see here. So back to 6 section or goal 6 there. 6E, diversity of housing types. What is this? Review development standards within low and medium density residential land use districts. Where is that coming from?
So this was, again, as we're going through the programs, identify ones that would implement the goals. And this goal speaks to various types of housing, as well as affordability. And as we mentioned in the presentation, sort of the missing middle are some of those that we're missing. So we have a lot of single family, and we have some a little bit higher density multifamily, but we don't have a lot of sort of duplexes and townhomes and things like that. And so the thought here is to study whether or not it makes sense to sort of maybe taper off through the downtown, right? Have a little bit higher density in the downtown. And then as we get towards single family residential, we actually kind of have a transition zone that's less dense, but still allows for flexibility in the type of housing.
Okay, well, I really am not comfortable with the low density. I want that taken out. And I also pretty sure that I recall the city council meeting when they decided on the EIRs that they were discussing that exactly transition zone, and they aren't even putting it in the EIR. So I think we need to take this out because the EIR isn't even doing that. They voted out that option. And then let's see, the other thing is I actually found that part about the ADUs that you were talking about. That would be the 6I, I guess. Why is it starting in 2030 for the time frame? Is that when it starts, or what does that mean, time frame actually? So it's the pre-permit ready ADUs, time frame 2030. So is that when it starts?
The time frame, those are the timeframes for completion. So that's the date at which we would need it to be done. And because it is a significant process to develop standard architectural plans that will meet our requirements, gotta get the designer, develop the plans, have them go through our.
Can't we just take it from Danville? They have 3.
We are going to reach out to them.
Okay.
But
so would that shorten it a little bit in theory?
Maybe, but we do also need to allocate staff time towards implementing these things.
It seems so far away though. I mean, we really like ADUs, right? That's kind of a nice way to. So is there any way we can shorten that realistically? Maybe, sort of, not really. You don't look happy.
We will be looking at the timeframes for all the programs comprehensively to make sure they're not clumped up in an unreasonable way, right? Because we want to make sure they're all feasible and achievable, and we actually achieve them on time. So it's kind of, we want all of these things done.
Right, sure. I want them now. Okay.
To get it, to look at the big picture.
Okay.
But we can shuffle around.
Okay. And so you have been reaching out to other jurisdictions, I guess, cities to see what they've got, huh? That's a good idea. Okay. Let's see here. So on 8B, the lot consolidation and redevelopment of non-vacant sites, it makes mention of small lots. Is there any consideration to making joining a small lot with a larger lot, or are you just limiting it to joining small lots? And I don't really know how the city is really organized by lot size, so it may be a stupid question, but just curious.
No, I think it's valid. I think the issue that we were trying to solve here is that, individually small lots can't provide too much density, but together they could provide a bit more.
Okay. So do you look at if the small lot is next to a larger lot, possibly convincing that owner to combine with I think I know there's some areas where they had a parking lot and it was a smaller parking lot. It was shared by 2 buildings, but if they, I'm just wondering if that is something that might be helpful too, kind of coordinating, joining a smaller lot with a bigger one to help. Just an idea. And then I was just wondering about the 8C, the building height one, under a new policy. You're conducting interviews, roundtables with local developers to understand the impacts of height restrictions on development, feasibility, and consider revisions to development standards. So is this purely just trying to get information from the builder, or, I mean, do the neighbors get any input on that? Because that seems to me would impact the builder too. You know, how the neighbors are going to react to it. I don't know. I'm just curious if that's, maybe that they already look at that. So we have a neighborhood, right, that has single family, and we've got building a big, large building behind it, sort of what happened with Moraga Boulevard, I guess. You know, that large building on Golden Gate, it really changed the way that the builder had to look at it because the neighbors had concerns. So is that part of what they'll talk about, or are you going to look at neighbor input too? Or is that something you just bring up? Like, hey, you're right next to a single family zone. What do you think is going to happen? Or how does that work?
Right, and I think maybe that goes towards the transition areas as well, to have different heights at different areas.
Right.
I think this is sort of information gathering so that we can address both the needs of the developer in order to have them build something, but also the needs of the neighborhood and the community as to having, so there's this balance, right? So that we know what might actually pencil, but that also might still meet the context.
Meet theirs, okay. Let's see here. 6E, let's see here, 6E. Oh yeah, I already talked about that. I want to get rid of that. The density bonus regulations on 8D, are all the things on that listed here? Are those exactly, is it more than what the law is requiring, or is it just what the law is requiring? That would be 8D density bonus regulations.
So I think that is to be consistent with state law.
Okay, so it's just, there's nothing additional. We haven't done extra. It's just exactly what the minimum is, what the state is requiring. Okay,
correct.
Okay, and I think that's it. Oh, and then I just had a quick question. So we're taking out rehabilitation of multifamily housing. It's under goal 9. It says the city is not eligible for many funding programs. Why aren't we eligible?
So I think it has to do with population size, and then yeah. So there's certain, and then also they're not there's another thing that's not coming to my mind right at this moment.
It's like income qualification of the jurisdiction. So there's through these programs, CDBG and home, you have to be of a certain population size to automatically get money. But then also, in order to apply for, if there were an apartment building that needed to be rehabbed, the city itself could not apply for that money on behalf of the property owner. There would need to be a nonprofit intermediary to receive and administer those funds and kind of own that project. So because these programs need to be focused on things the city can do and that are like action items for us to do, like one of our evaluation criteria, we propose to delete it because we can't take action with the programs available. But it can be considered as part of the housing fund.
Oh, so it has to fall back. Okay. So by taking it out, like we're doing this now, because I've seen a couple buildings that have, they got rid of all their tenants who were low income people to build new one. So, I mean, if we take this out completely now, and then let's say for some reason some funding becomes available, would we be able to put it back in? Or can we just leave it in and say in case some funding becomes available? Does that make sense? I mean, I hate to take it out because I'd really like to have that option, right?
It might make sense to put it under the housing fund allocation as an option. So that way we could also sort of, if funding came available, we would apply for it. And then also allocate city resources like as a matching kind of thing.
It would be helpful because I think some of the buildings have kind of gotten into disrepair. So I think it would be good to be able to offer that in different ways. So, okay, that's fine. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Christine. Any other questions, comments from the members of the GPAC? Okay. I've got a few. I'll try to go through them quickly and try to just, with the spirit of moving us on, to get us done before the typical city council meeting ends. So 6E, diversity of housing types. Christine touched on this. So is this kind of a formulation you'd have with SB 9? Because that's kind of what this is, I would think. Is that, am I looking at this the right way?
Let me get there.
Yeah. Talks about fourplexes, for example. Maybe that's just an example, but in a world with SB 9, is this the language? This is kind of the language you'd have, I would think, right?
So the difference.
Well,
okay. No,
I was
sorry.
just going to say SB 9 is only applicable to single family residential, and this might be sort of the transition areas that are currently like still multifamily, but encouraging these different types.
Okay. And, let's say we have that, and we have this concept of transition area, which, high level sense, yeah, makes some sense. We get no RENA credit for this, I would think, though, right? It's not like we're identifying specific parcels that we would say we could accommodate a fourplex, or would we have to sort of do that, have it zoned a certain way to do that, right?
I don't know that we would necessarily use an opportunity. So I guess it depends on the type. Like if it was a garden apartment versus a duplex, that might be a different story. I don't know if we would necessarily identify a specific opportunity site in these zones, but we certainly could count them if they were to be developed with housing.
Okay. And as I understand the criteria, you need be able to accommodate 20 units to have something which might be deemed as like affordable for HCD. So again, this goes back to your comment about the missing middle, and Renata, your comment with the graphic that I think you showed earlier. That's what the concept is here, right?
Right. There is a point at which it makes financial sense for affordability to be part of the program. Yes.
Okay. All right. So let's see. I'm going to flip to the next page. It's 6. Let me go back to, I guess it's 6I. And a few folks have touched on this already. I'll try to be real quick. The permit-ready ADUs, and I'd kind of echo Christine's comment. Gosh, it seems like why wait a decade to get this figured out? But I'd also note that the more affordable source for ADUs are manufactured units. And I only know a smidgen about this because we've looked at one from my mother-in-law. But I think we might want to have flexibility to accommodate that. So there may be, if there's a cheaper way to deliver it, and it looks okay, especially if it's someone's backyard, that maybe we try to figure out how we could accommodate manufactured units. And that would be something that might be meaningful if we're really concerned about affordability. And let's see. So I'm going to flip up to 8A. And I was trying to understand this concept that we've got a maximum number of units given zoning standards, and then there's a concept of we don't have a minimum. And the comment is maybe should have a minimum. But I guess I'm thinking, if you've got a property owner developer who's developing something, they're doing it based on, they're not if you have a developer who's not trying to jam every single last unit into a site, on one level, do we care? If they think that that's like the best choice, the best outcome, and they're kind of below what the maximum is, should we just let them kind of go that place? Or I'm just trying to understand this better here, what this discussion is in this item 8A.
So I think that the thought is it might be more profitable for a developer to develop single family or some lower density, but that may or may not be the highest and best use of the parcel for the city. So having sort of single family on a downtown parcel might not make as much sense for us as a community and our RENA numbers, but it might make sense for the developer. So that's the thought there.
Okay. I'd love to get Mike Kim's view on that, but okay, well, maybe that's a topic for later.
Likewise.
And on 8B, this lot consolidation, again, this is where we miss redevelopment because that's what redevelopment agencies would do. You consolidate lots. Can't go there now. But so let's say we have this as a program. That doesn't help us with RENA either, though, right? Because the lots are what they are right now. We can't say we're going to assume that these ones consolidate and therefore we can get X number of units out of them. So no RENA help here on that strategy?
So I think we're trying to at least reach out to the folks that could, in the areas that could be consolidated. And if we can get some traction or some documentation that they might be interested or that there might be an incentive for them to do that, then we potentially could count it.
Okay. And then in the actual objective part of this, where it talks about relocation, we're not talking about the city getting in the relocation game, right? I mean, that's kind of wondering, like, how much into this is the city in this enterprise? Or is that, am I just assuming something just based on what the text here talking about support for relocation of commercial tenants?
So
I guess,
go ahead. So one of the potential barriers that someone might say that one of the barriers someone might identify as a small lot owner is that we'd have to relocate our commercial tenants. And so if as the city we can provide support in some way, be it financial or like easing the process or like helping the process, not easing it, but that's kind of the support, not actually administering the relocation itself, but we want to retain commercial businesses in the city and keep them in town. And so if that's one of the ways that we could encourage folks to consolidate lots while also retaining those businesses.
Okay.
That's something I want to pursue.
Which would be something separate from the housing trust fund, I would think. So maybe it's something, if we wanted to do this, then maybe another mechanism perhaps?
Potentially.
Maybe part of the housing trust fund, I don't know.
But yeah, it could be part.
Okay. So maybe we want to craft that trust fund to be as broad as possible, to Christine's earlier point in this one. So, okay. In the interest of time, I'm going to stop. Those are kind of the main ones. And I think that was really a helpful set of questions. This is a lot to go through. This is like where the meat on the bone here. This is a big topic area. So with that, I want to open this to any public questions or comments.
If you would like to make a public comment, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen or *9 if you're calling in. Cheryl M has raised her hand.
Cheryl, welcome.
Cheryl, we cannot hear you if you're trying to speak.
It doesn't work with headsets. Technology, I love it. Okay, so funding from the state, and I've forgotten what it's called, and I know it stopped in 2008. But is there any way that the council could be directed from you or the Mayor Geringer might take it back to see if they might write a letter to their state representatives to get funding, to fight to get the funding back going again? I know that we're in the COVID time right now, but by the time this may go into effect again, maybe we'll be out of COVID. And are there any local groups that are working on this? The first thing that came to mind is League of Voters, but that's not the right group. But something like that would be able to work on, get cities together that would be able to fight for that. Because I imagine a lot of cities are in the same position. And is there any funding that might come from the federal government that might help us out that we could tap into? And then you brought up the free prefab homes, and I agree with that. There is a company in Berkeley that I think does that, and if we needed to talk to them, we might be able to bring them in. But maybe not just for ADUs, but for other developments. I think they work on building for fourplexes and other things. And then if you take commercial parking places from commercial buildings, then that puts them out of compliance with the parking ratio that is needed and required by the city of Lafayette. So if they wanted to sell their property, then someone has to pay the penalties, fees. And so if the city or housing takes away parking from a local business, are the businesses still going to be penalized? I don't think they should be, but if it's no fault to their own that they're out of compliance. And then the last thing is housing by right. You brought up a little bit about retaining the commercial district, but right now the housing by right means that the developer does not have to include any commercial zoning, such as Brown Avenue. Because it's housing by right, they don't have to replace any commercial district. They can, like Corporate Terrace, if they so choose, but they're not required to. So if we're trying to protect our commercial district, I don't know what the answer to that. I wave back and forth on it, but it should be something we talk about. And those are my points. Thank you.
Great. Cheryl, thank you very much. Those are actually great questions. Anyone else you see, Sarah?
Robert L.
Okay. Robert, welcome.
Hello. A couple of comments, things that are concerning. Certainly the parking standards is very concerning if you have a bunch of these new buildings built with insufficient parking. You know, one building you can handle on a block because the cars get scattered around the block, but then you start putting in 2 or 3 of these and all of a sudden your neighborhood's overrun with cars. And I'm not really sure that you can justify saying that the cars and the residential cars and the commercial cars are completely opposite, so that you could use the same parking lot. So I think that needs to be looked at carefully, or we're going to end up with cars all over the place. The 0.5 spaces per unit is very concerning. That's I don't know anybody that has a half a car. Let's see, the $600 million number to support the low-income housing, that people should be reminded of that, because that's a lot of fundraising. Regarding the looking for the housing in the middle, what do you call it, the missing middle, I think I echo I think it was Matt's comment that, how are you going to get that built if you allow 35 to 50 units with the bonuses in downtown? What developer is going to underdevelop a project? They're going to max it out. And that really impacts the character of our community. And that's, I think, what's concerning a lot of people. There's talk of increasing the density from 35 units, but it's already way too dense. You look at 950 Huff is a perfect example. It's a beautiful building, but it's on too small a lot. And so if you want to retain the character, the mixed variety, it's not going to happen with this kind of zoning. So I don't know how we're going to do that, but it needs to be fixed. And making it more density isn't going to help. Let's see. In the design review standards, is there any way to get, they used to require like step back on the second floor to reduce the massing so it doesn't look so huge. And especially when it's pushing to the edge of the, or the minimum limits of the setbacks, if they could require something like that on the second floor or third floor, that would certainly help retain the character of the community by making it not look like just a wall of boxes everywhere. Let's see. And it is concerning to have the commercial tenants being displaced. You know, we want to have a vibrant downtown and some business, but if they all get bought out and converted to condos, it's not going to be much of a vibrant community. Alrighty, I think that's it. I'll add some comments later when I have time.
Right, Robert, thank you so much. Any other comments, Sarah?
I am not seeing any other hands raised at this time.
Okay. If I could, Cheryl raised a couple of questions, and I think this writing answers to a couple of them maybe might be worth just noting, because she asked about the getting funding back. If it's redevelopment, I mean, that's been tried, that's failed. There's no interest of the state to do that. And on the federal funding side, I'm sure that there are lots of cities trying to do that, and I know staff will try to do that too, but these are all very daunting because we're competing against a whole lot of other players. I heard commercial parking spaces come up, something we talked about. That's something we probably need to really kind of think through and get our head around. And on the last one, the housing by right, I don't want to have this meeting going a long time, but maybe there's something where the interplay between that and the commercial aspect of downtown might be something for us to understand better. Maybe not right now, but that might be something to sort of like for us to really kind of get our head around. That's a good point she brought up. So maybe we can just like flag that as something to sort of think through a bit at another meeting where we're not pushing 9 o'clock. So I think unless there's any other comments from members of the Gpac on this, I think everyone raised some great comments and thoughts. This is, like I said earlier, really, this is where the rubber hits the road. So Sarah, we've got until the 20th to get comments in, right?
Correct, and then we'll discuss it again at your next meeting.
Yeah, okay, so we'll have another whack at the pinata on this one here.
And I definitely have been taking notes, so we'll work to address those.
Yeah, I'm sure you have several pages on that. Okay, great. So that moves us to housekeeping. And this was touched on at an earlier meeting, but sort of as a reward for doing so well, we're going to go back to bi-monthly meetings again. And it's frankly, to use my tortured metaphor of the widget production line, we just have to process a lot of these things. And there are deadlines that we've got to meet to get it to planning so they can do a credible job. And then, of course, it goes to the city council, and they have to do a credible job on this too. And it has to go to housing and community development by a certain point. So we're sort of like, the tip of the spear on this whole thing. So we're looking at our next meeting being on January 4th. The idea being would be first and third Tuesdays of the month. Now, with January, because of the Martin Luther King holiday, that kind of pushes things back because the Planning Commission normally would meet on that Monday. They meet on the Tuesday. So the thought then was meet on Wednesday. I believe, though, Mayor Geringer, you might have a conflict in that. I wanted to see if maybe Thursday might work, the 20th.
I do have a conflict on Wednesday evening. It's the CCTA meeting on that date. I'm finding my calendar. And I believe that in looking, I penciled in the Thursday for Gpac, if that is the will of the group.
Right. So if I could check.
And council member, and excuse me, Vice Mayor Anduri is also, if that date turns out to be inconvenient as the alternate, could attend, but I want to have a perfect attendance record if I can possibly do that.
We don't want to sort of ruin your record in your first at bat. So so let me ask the question. I mean, does the 20th, a Thursday, can we do that? Get a quorum? In which case that would be, I think, the ideal if that's possible for folks.
It works for me.
Okay.
Me too.
Okay.
Yeah, it works.
Okay.
Jim, am I reading this right? We've actually got 3 meetings in January. Is that correct? So we've got the 4th, and then this joint meeting on the 10th. and then what is now the 20th. Is
Yeah.
that right? Am I seeing this right?
Yeah, I was going to circle back to that other thing,
Okay,
but
sorry.
these are for us only to do our housing element stuff.
Okay.
So why don't we book it for the 20th, the Thursday, which means the schedule, that this lovely multicolored schedule here gets revised. The other item for January is, and I don't know if this has been set, but a sort of a joint session with the City Council and Planning on the 10th, the Monday. My understanding is that would be prior to the normal City Council meeting. And I think the idea here is that in as much as everything we do is linked with what planning and the council has to do, it would just seem to make sense to have some sort of a discussion of the three bodies, maybe even just it could be as simple as talking through this schedule, just to make sure we're all on the same page. Because in the end, there'll be a point where we have to deliver something to HCD, and we need to make sure the council has enough time to really do its thing, and likewise planning. So just instead of doing this in three silos, doing it, talking it all through just seemed to make a lot of sense. And I guess what I would view is that this thing on the 10th, if that's what holds, Sarah, and I guess I don't know if that's been confirmed or not, I would say we're asking a lot of people in Gpac, because now we're going to twice a month. And if there's a conflict that someone has, I'd say it's totally respected. But I think if we could just get enough folks, along with the planning commissioners and council, at least I kind of think it's almost more for their benefit, because they're following us, so they can get a sense of what's coming at them. So I would say if someone can't make it on the 10th, that's perfectly understandable. So, Sarah, are we confirmed for the 10th?
So we are on the draft council agenda, and it would be just an hour before that meeting, sort of a pre-meeting joint session, to talk through about what, where we've been, where we're going, and then also to get everyone on the same page about the affirmatively furthering fair housing rules, which is a new aspect of the housing element.
Okay, getting a thumbs up from the mayor on that. And I see Stella, you got your hand up.
Yes, this is about Wednesday, January 19th. Can I discuss that now, or are we still talking about the 10th?
Well, we were talking about that earlier, so please. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't catch that. So that currently has a Transcirc meeting on the calendar. Whether it will actually happen, I don't know. The first and third Wednesdays are Transcirc meetings.
So that's another good reason to push it to Thursday, the 20th then. Good, okay. So we have two great reasons to go to the 20th, because we have two important people we want to be able to keep in this in the conversation. So that works. Good. Okay. I think I've covered the housekeeping, unless there's any questions that folks have on that. And again, I would ask people to take a look. I mean, I have to say, staff put a lot into this lovely multicolored calendar here. It's really useful to look at that, because you could see how all these three different bodies kind of like fitted together here. And, to help us meet our deadline with HCD. So I would have you just look at that. Sarah, do we need to take any public comment on this topic? Is that?
I suppose it is an agenda item, so it would make sense.
Well, if there is anyone in the public who would like to comment on our housekeeping calendar, we welcome that. So we'll see if there's anyone's raised their hand.
I do not see any hands raised. Okay,
well, that's great. So then we save this like small item for the end of the agenda. I'm sure no one would mind, spending another few hours talking about AB 2923, the BART laws. Just a non-controversial, simple thing. But Sarah, this is a huge topic. What did you want to do with that?
I just wanted to give you an update, because it was going to the Planning Commission, and they did discuss it and we were seeking direction prior to going to the City Council, and Planning Commission asked for some additional information about what it would mean if they did or did not include it as part of an opportunity sites. as part of the housing, this cycle of the housing element. So what that would mean and due to different densities. So we're trying to get a little bit more information. Obviously, there's some assumptions to be made, but trying to get more information and bring that back to the Planning Commission. Anticipated in January to go back, I believe, on their 18th meeting. And then once we get direction from them, we'll take that direction to council, and then ultimately that will feed into Gpac's discussions about the overall opportunity sites and
Right.
whether.
Thank you. And I think that planning may have discussed AB 2923 at an earlier meeting. If that is the case, it might be helpful if it's possible to highlight like when that discussion starts at the planning commission. So if one of us wants to, not zoom into it, just go onto the YouTube thing and take a look at it, you at least know where to go. Is that possible?
You mean to send a link of like
Yeah.
when they started the discussion? Sure.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. It would be helpful to bone up on the topic. It's a big one. Okay. So is there any questions on that from the group? Okay, no hands up. Well, so with that, we have a couple of ticks before 9. So I call this is like a half a council meeting. It's only 3 hours. So, but thank you all. I've got a lot done. Really appreciate it. And I don't think I need a motion to adjourn, but I think we'll just say, I wish you all a great Christmas, great holidays, great New Year's. And I know you'll get all your comments in on the housing element by the 20th. That'll be your Christmas present to Santa, and or planning, I should say. And we'll pick this up again in January. So looking forward to it. So have a good night, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.